Hey guys, hey ladies, hey friends, hey foes. We just wanted to take a second to remind you that while we're okay swearing when little ears are listening, you might not be, and that's okay. So here's your chance to pause us and wait for nap time, or pop in your earbuds. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Me in the straight jacket, 'cause I'm a criminal, I need some medication. I'm hearing voices, I'm making bad choices.
Welcome back to another episode of Done Playing by the Rules. My name is Jenelle.
And I'm Jenna. What have you been doing? You like that?
Oh my gosh.
Just get into it. What you been
Everything. I went back to Minnesota for the weekend because my family had some minor semi-private crises going on. And it was wonderful. I got to see my niece and nephew who are so cute. Today was nature school where I do all my appointments. So I had acupuncture today, and then I started going to Pure Barre, and I'm kind of obsessed with it.
Isn't
If
it
you've
hard?
noticed, it's so hard, and my stuff hurts so bad afterwards.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've been neglecting huge muscle groups, and I had no idea. Like the stuff we were doing today, I was like looking around, and everyone was looking at me like, this isn't okay. Like it's so
I did it with
fun.
like a group of probably like 10 friends, and we were in like a regular class, so there was a lot of people that had been going for a long time, and we were all shaking. We could not stop laughing because of how bad we were shaking, and it was just
I
crazy.
burst out laughing in the middle of class today because I was up, like you're up on your tiptoes with like your heels together, and my bottoms of my legs were physically
Yes.
like shaking like a jackhammer, and I started laughing at myself and was like looking around, and no one could see me, so they were probably just like, but it was shaking so hard that I would have been shaking.
And you cannot
something,
stop
like if
it.
I would. It's so hard but so fun. And
They also have like versions of it on Peloton too.
yeah.
If you don't want to go
Yes,
to Pure Barre,
and that's
you do
kind of-
Peloton.
Yes. Peloton's amazing, and a lot of the stuff that I can do in Pure Barre is because of exercises I've done in Peloton. Jess Sims
Yeah.
has a like hip stretching class where you work on lifting like you do that 90-90 position, and you work on lifting your back leg off the floor and holding it.
Yeah.
If you have tight hips, that is like the best exercise, but it is so hard. And we were doing that in class today, and I was like, I can do this, where I used to not even be able to lift my leg off the floor behind me at all. And I
Can
was
you
like,
please
"Thanks,
include a video
Peloton."
of that?
I will. I'll send it to you.
I'm trying to see what they call it in Peloton. I want to say they call it bar,
They call it
don't
just
they?
bar. It's just bar, yeah. Because like Allie
Okay.
Love teaches hip hop bar. I've taken
Yes.
like 2 bar classes.
And she's so cute.
She's
Allie Love.
so cute, and she's so fun, and her music is so good.
I know. I follow her on Instagram too. I have like
You would.
certain
No, I follow all of
instructors.
them.
Oh, do you? I have certain ones that I'm obsessed with and I follow them. So if you have Peloton, you can do it through there. And if not, I think Pure Barre
And
does
reminder,
like a free class.
you don't need you get a free class at Pure Barre, and you just take a foundations class, and the app is really easy to use. But also reminder, you don't need Peloton equipment to do Peloton. Ask me or Jenna. We will send you I think we can send you a free 60-day trial, and then it's $13 a month after that. Jenna and I have non-Peloton treadmills and weights. And so
And I didn't have a
everyone
treadmill
thinks-
till recently. Like I did it without
Yeah,
anything.
when I was in my apartment, I was just doing HIIT classes on the floor and strength training on the floor.
Yep. And then I did outside running if you want to do running.
Running, yeah. The outside runs are so good when you're out traveling too.
Yeah.
Oh, heaven.
Everyone always asks me whenever I say Peloton. And then if you do like I think it's 100 classes, they send you a free shirt and it says Peloton across it. It's called like the Century Club. And people are always like, oh, you have a Peloton? I'm like, no, I don't. I just do Peloton.
They always say, is it worth the investment? And I'm like, I don't know. I pay $13 a month, and I have like a
No idea.
$600 treadmill. So you tell me, I have no idea if it's worth the investment.
Same here. Like, nope, no idea.
We're the poor Peloton people. I love when I see people on Instagram that have like the bike, the treadmill,
Yes.
whatever
The
that
mirror.
new machine is, the mirror, the guide. And I'm like, holy shit, you guys are fancy. I'm just over here like with my rickety weight set that we got on a like secondhand from during the pandemic.
Yep. Well, during the pandemic, we had gotten rid of all of our weights right before because we were doing gyms. So we didn't have any. So we were literally lifting children, lifting cans, lifting everything we could find.
Yeah, the gym I belong to was like fill up your milk jugs and
Yeah.
use a laundry detergent bottle, and we were using toilet paper for stuff, but then no one had toilet paper, and then I had like battle ropes that were made out of towels under my bed frame, and it was like
Isn't that
so
funny?
now I'm like, it was so chaotic. We didn't know what we were doing.
Yep. It was. It really was. Okay.
This has been Jenna and Janelle's Fitness Corner.
Welcome.
Why
are
do we
in
need
tank
fitness
tops.
so bad, Jenna? We need fitness so bad because we have mental health problems.
Yes, it is the month of May, which is crazy because I can remember us covering this last year and it feels like just a month ago.
We're
It's so quick.
back.
So,
Our favorite month, honoring us.
Yep. If you don't know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I think that's really appropriate because I feel like people kind of get out of the slump and it's kind of like spring and people are like, oh, I feel better. And it's like, wait, pause. You still need to do some work. Don't stop your medication or your therapy or whatever you're doing or your self-care. Keep going.
I was talking to my acupuncturist. He was like, you're going to feel so great after this. I was like, so I'm hearing you say stop your medication. And he was like, I would never say stop your medication. And I was like, but I'm hearing stop your medication. And he was like, don't even joke.
No. And I've come to accept, which was a really hard road for me, the fact that I am lifelong, at this point, medication taker because I have gone on and off. And I finally had a doctor just say to me, like, this is your brain chemistry. It's also experience-based because of some experiences in my life, but also I am just an anxious person and I have a lot of mental health issues. And that's just who I am. And there's nothing wrong with it. I wouldn't be the person I was without those, but it doesn't mean I can stop taking medication. I know some people that have used it for certain phases of their life. And
yes, me too.
I've come to accept that that's not me. So
we've tried it and we wish it was. And when people are like, oh, well, you can get off your medication, you just need to like have the willpower and stuff. Like, that's a great thing to say to some people, but it doesn't apply to everyone. It doesn't apply to me and my brain chemistry, and it never will, no matter how badly you want it to. It's just, there are people that getting off medication isn't an option for. And hopefully that stigma will be gone.
And it's hard. It's like,
it's still there.
Yeah. If you know me, you know I don't do many medications. I even had a girlfriend text me the other day and was like, a reminder, clean out your medicine cabinet. I just cleaned out mine and almost everything was expired and like stocked back up.
That kid stuff expires so fast.
I have, I think, 2 medications besides like my prescription. Like we do not do many medications. Almost everything else is like natural. And I can remember as a kid, we tried like St. John's wort. And I just remember like not understanding why it didn't work and just being so discouraged because I had this high hope. And I was like a preteen at this time. And I just was like, why won't it work for me? What's wrong with me? I'm never going to get over this, because I had never tried real medication and the type of therapy I needed. Because no one really knew.
We should research. Is St. John's wort even a thing anymore? Does it even exist anymore? Because does it? Because you would know, because you're way crunchier than I am. But Jenna and I also will frequently, we're so anti-medicine that we will have to remind each other to take Tylenol if we have a headache. Like, or Josh will be like, you have a headache? Have you taken anything? And I'll be like, no, I don't want to take anything. Like Jenna and I'll be like, Tylenol.
Yeah. And we don't even have Tylenol. And I had, not that long ago, I texted Brandon and I asked Brandon, I was like, can you text your parents and ask them for some Tylenol? And he was like, oh my gosh, like, are you okay? Like he freaked out because he knows like that's a big deal. Like it's not just,
or if I ask Josh for heartburn medicine, yes. He's like, what's wrong?
By the way, here's my crunchy plug. Beep. If you have heartburn, indigestion, reflux, I struggle with that. And it's a lot better when I have my anxiety under control. And I tried over-the-counter stuff. And then remember, they pulled a lot of it because of its link to Alzheimer's or dementia or one of those.
Esophageal cancer. There was one too.
Oh, was it? Oh my gosh.
I think
so. I was like, nothing's ever going to work. So I had a naturopath doctor tell me to do licorice. And they're like chewable things. Nothing has ever worked so well. I am like a full believer in these. And they're just like these little chewable things. They taste like licorice. They're not awful. They're a little chalky. They work way better than anything I've ever tried.
Okay, we need you to link that immediately because I hate taking that weird medicine. And I only do it like once every 3 months, but it's still like...
And if you know me, I have a history of Alzheimer's and dementia in my family. So that's like a hard no. And
that's a hard no,
yeah. So that's my crunchy plug. And I have one more crunchy plug. If you listen to this and you want to look into St. John's wort, do your research, because I am pretty sure, if I remember right, it makes your birth control, especially if, I think it's only the pill, ineffective. So, because I can remember when I did it, it was a big deal. And we went to this little like health food store, and they were, because of my age, I was like a preteen and into my like teen years, and they were just like, if you're on the pill, just be really careful. So
I had
that's
no
your
idea.
warning, because
See,
the
this
last
is
thing
how
I want
much
to
women
do
don't know.
is like
Just get a bunch of people pregnant by
Right.
Jenna's gonna post her St. John's wort, and I'm gonna post a coupon to Plan B, and then
Yeah.
we'll have all of your bases covered for when your birth
Yes.
control fails.
right. And like I said, I think it's only the pill, but I will double check and add it in the notes. But yeah,
Jesus,
just keep
either
that in
way,
mind.
like holy shit, I never would have thought about that. You just think whenever you're taking anything natural, like it can't interfere with anything. Anything can interfere with stuff.
Yep. So yeah, it says that you should be using another method, such as a barrier method of contraception, when consuming St. John's wort, because the contraceptive pills might not be as effective. It doesn't mean they won't work,
Wow.
but yeah. So just
Oh my God. Okay. Oh my.
Okay,
Now I
so-
have to get back to mental health corner from now I'm sweating about somebody accidentally
well,
getting
this
pregnant.
is
I don't
a
want
great
this.
lead into, because we're talking today about intrusive thoughts. And with this, I kind of tag in ruminating thoughts. And one of my thoughts that I was so scared of as a kid was that I would never get over my anxiety and I would live with it forever. And then it led to really dark and scary thoughts. So intrusive thoughts are unwanted, uncontrollable thoughts, but they do not reflect the person and their true beliefs. It's basically like,
Ooh, that's an interesting distinction. I wouldn't have
Yes.
thought of that.
and it's interesting when I research this more, because it really links to a few things, but really links to OCD. And I struggled with ruminating, which is when you keep having the same thoughts over and over, and intrusive thoughts, and no one ever linked it to OCD per se. And then researching it, I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much more sense. And it is something I struggled with so bad. And I can remember going to my dad, because my dad struggled with anxiety. Basically, I was like, how do I know I'm not a psychopath? Because I have these
Yeah.
thoughts and they are dark and scary. And he said, the difference is people with, he said anxiety, but I think it's OCD, anxiety, depression, all of it, have these thoughts because it's basically their worst nightmares, and they play it in their mind, and that's an anxiety thing. And then a lot of times it leads to OCD behaviors, versus psychopaths don't really sit there and think about it. They basically just act upon it and do it. And an anxious person will sit there and think about it nonstop and be scared of it. And a psychopath is not scared of it.
That
They're
makes perfect sense.
yeah, and so
They
and I
embrace
mean,
it.
this is him explaining this to me as like a 13 or 14-year-old. And that was so much comfort to me because I was so scared. And he gave an example. He had read in the newspaper an awful, awful article about someone, I think, throwing a kid over a balcony. And then he became petrified and was having panic attacks because my brother was just born and he was scared he would do that. And so finally, a doctor explained to him, no, like you're just having these intrusive thoughts and it's playing in your mind because now it is a huge fear of yours and it's causing you anxiety. The person who did that did not have this fear. They just acted on impulse and did this. And it was not scary to them. And he was like, okay. And he said he would get, especially once he had kids, he would have those thoughts and be super scared about, like, you know, you hear these awful, like, mom drowns kids in bathtub. And I think as a person in a stable mindset, we can't understand what caused them to do that. And so we sit there in our brain, especially if you have an anxious brain or an over analytical brain, your brain sits there and tries to think, well, how do I know that's not going to happen to me? And it's really scary.
And how do I wire the pathway of how a human being does something that I deem so unthinkable that looks just like a regular person?
Yes, because how do they always start
Your brain has to
she
make
was
sense
a
of
regular
it.
person. Like she was a wonderful, doting mom. Like
Susan Smith was a great mom until she strapped her kids in and drove them into the river.
Right.
Like,
I mean, sometimes
was she?
you'll hear,
And then like,
yeah. Sometimes you'll hear about like, oh, they weren't that stable, but a lot of times it's like they had an idyllic life. They were multimillionaires. They lived in this huge mansion and then they just set it on fire one day. And it's like, what led to that path? And how
so
can everyone say she was
human beings need to be able to rationalize it. And so our brain just clicks into it and replays it over and over again, even though you can't rationalize it. And then it becomes like this obscure fear. And I totally get what you're talking about with your dad. Like when you're a new parent, especially, you have these intense, weird fears of things that could happen. Well, I remember there was a phase where I was sure my tire was going to blow out of my car. So
Mm-hmm.
I would drive with both hands at 10 and 2, like clenched so that I'd be ready
Yes.
to like, that never happened, but I probably did it for 6 months. And
Right.
so,
And if you struggle with intrusive thoughts, a lot of times that's where it leads to OCD behaviors because a
mhm.
person with OCD gets stuck and they're playing this thought over and over in their mind. And the thought is so unwanted that the person with OCD will use compulsions to reduce the distress by the thought. So they'll do something. So, say you have, like, I've struggled with sickness. So then I have over sanitized things and my hands because I think if I don't, then it'll lead to this. And it's like a preventative, I don't know, even if it doesn't make sense, like say we were playing outside and then I go and sanitize my kids, like that doesn't make sense. There was no contact. We were by ourselves, but it's just me basically trying to prevent one of my fears from happening. And I can remember like sitting for hours and thinking about these and trying to work them out in my mind, which caused more anxiety. And then I
Yes,
would
it
think
always makes
like,
it worse.
yes, a thought that came up a lot was like, why do I have this thought? No matter what it was. And it would change. It was kind of like along the same lines a lot of times, but it could
Yeah.
change depending on what was going on. And then I would get paranoid, like, especially if the thought came out of nowhere. Is this a premonition? Does this mean that this is going
You
to
and I are
happen?
always like, is it a premonition? Is it a
Yes.
premonition?
And so then it's like, then your next thought is, what can I do to prevent this? And a lot of the
Mhm.
times that's your compulsion. And you would think like, okay, if I sanitize or if I count or if I, if I'm scared of fire, if I check the stove 5 times, like it's going to actually lead to that not happening. And so therefore I'll get better. It's actually the opposite because you're just fueling that fire. And so that intrusive
You
thought
are.
actually just continues. And then you're almost hyper aware. And so anytime you hear something that is related to that intrusive thought, you're like, oh gosh, oh gosh. And it just like keeps stroking that fire and it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, it's like a gas leak kind of. And I remember my only experience with OCD, and we have OCD in my family, but my only experience was I had like a 6 month stretch when I was, I don't know, under 10, where I had to chew things evenly on my both
Oh, I
sides of
still
my
do.
mouth. So
Hmm.
you do? Okay,
Hmm.
but what was your thought process behind that OCD
I have
behavior?
no idea. And like if I'm walking and say I step on an acorn on my right foot, I have to find one for my left foot. It's so weird. And I
No.
don't know
You're
why. It's
Zach.
probably just
You're weird little Zach. I
it's
love
it's
it for
stuff
you.
I right. It's stuff I developed as a kid. So now I don't know per se, but it was definitely
Mhm.
something during that time. So why do you do it?
I remember thinking at that time that if I didn't do it, one side of my teeth would get worn out before the other side.
I could see that. Yeah.
Isn't that but like I came from a very like teeth conscious family. Like my godfather and
Mm.
uncle is an orthodontist, and my parents were very like we were at the dentist every 6 months from 6 months old. Like they were very, very, very teeth oriented. And so I think that I was just very like something in the hyper focus of our teeth health
Mm-hmm.
was sinking into the fact that if I didn't chew evenly on my molars, that I would wear out one side faster than the other. I don't know. I
Mm.
also had TMJ that was undiagnosed, so maybe I had like pain that I didn't really
Right.
but it was the only time I've ever had it, and it was so severe I can still see it in my mind. And I remember going into our laundry room off our kitchen one time and being like, what the fuck is wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like 7 years old and I couldn't figure it out. And I don't know if I ever told my parents, but it was every meal, everything had to be three, 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 three. And I
Mm-hmm.
still like things in threes, which is odd because it's usually even. But I
Yeah.
still really like things in groups of three. So
So
it's still there somewhere.
I'm an 8 counter. I think it's because I was a dancer for so long.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm a
Mm-hmm.
list maker in my head and it always has to be in threes. And so,
Ooh.
and I still do it and I'm working on it. It's really hard though. But I can't do anything without a checklist in my head. I can't have, and this is part of it. Like, I don't want intrusive thoughts or ruminating thoughts. Ruminating thoughts aren't always intrusive. Intrusive thoughts are more of a negative, dark thought. Ruminating is
Yeah.
thinking something over and over. And it's not always like dark. Like I get ruminating thoughts about like my kids being sick, which to me is dark. But
Yeah.
like if I'm showering, I can't just shower. I either have to have something like a podcast on that I can physically listen to, or I'm making a list in my head and it's the order of doing things. So it's wash hair, rinse, condition, wash hair, rinse, condition. And I repeat it over and over and over. And after I check off the first one, I add a third one to the bottom because, and this is an OCD thing, if I don't, then I don't know where my mind will wander. So it's
And then
like
what
I just
happens when
always
you get
have
to
keep
the
this.
bottom?
Then it's get out of the shower, dry off, lotion.
Oh,
Same thing.
okay.
Until I
You had them
become
ready.
Oh, I know. So until I become
Until you become
preoccupied.
distracted
Yes.
enough. Yep. Okay.
So you can guarantee I've never taken a
That is
shower where I've forgotten to shave my legs or something because I'm very thorough
never.
in my shower. But yeah, it's
Once in a while, I'll forget like one leg, like once or twice a year. I'll forget
Yep.
one leg, but like I'm never forgetting in general, like an
Yeah.
actual thing. Like
no, it's
I
because
and I
it's
don't showers for
in your
people with
head.
anxiety, OCD, PTSD, any of the things that we have are hard. I never
Mm-hmm.
take a silent shower if I can help it.
No.
I mean, if it happens once in a while, fine. But like today, I was in the shower listening to the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial on my iPhone on court TV while I was
Yeah.
showering. Like
Yeah.
I need someone talking to me because I don't need to be
Right.
alone with my thoughts under
No.
any
And so
circumstances.
like showering is not relaxing to me. Like sometimes I'm like, I don't have enough energy to
Never.
shower. It's a
Hmm.
mental thing. And it's like that with
Yeah.
everything. Like if I'm doing laundry, I can't just do laundry. I either have to say out loud what I am folding and what's coming up next, or I have to listen to a podcast or Marco Polo, which is like a video thing. I just,
Hmm.
and it's something I definitely need to work on. I need to get more comfortable with my thoughts,
Yeah.
but the intrusive thoughts are less. And I think that's also because I've done work in other areas. It's a
Yeah.
messy, muddy situation.
And there's also like I've entered the area of TikTok that shows like a lot of the algorithm of TikTok has figured out that I'm interested in this stuff. And so it'll show like the TikToks of intrusive thoughts. And to give a little bit more understanding to intrusive thoughts, it's ruminating thoughts, like you said, is kind of just the repetitiveness, but the intrusive thought is kind of like the guy that jumps out from behind the door. So like a lot of the TikToks will show like a mom walking up the stairs and she'll stop and be like, what if my baby falls off this
Mhm.
railing, even though it's sleeping in its bed? And like you're just going about your day and then something stops you in your tracks and something completely unrelated, probably to what you're doing, jumps into the front of your brain. And so
Yep.
the intrusive thought is kind of the surprise. The ruminating thought is the thought that keeps coming back for more and more and more.
Exactly. There's also a difference because some people might get that thought real quick and it's like, what the hell? Like that would never happen. And they can just shake it
Yeah.
off. And they might be like, or they might be like, acknowledge it. Oh, that was a weird thought. That's not going to
Yeah.
happen. That's silly and move on. But some people, myself included,
Jenna.
obsess about these thoughts and worry that they might be something bigger about us. This is where they become intrusive because they're reoccurring, they're unwanted. A lot of times they're very disturbing thoughts or even images. I've even had it with just images that cause distress.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it interferes with your life, unfortunately. I've had it many times where I'll see it as like a sign that I shouldn't go somewhere. Like if I get this, like say I have a flight
Same.
coming up. And so
Yeah.
I all of a sudden get this thought, like, what if it crashes or whatever it may be? And then I picture the plane crashing and what would happen and what that would mean for me and all of that. And so then in my head, I think, okay, that's my sign to not go. And so then I won't go and enjoy this
Yeah.
event. And that's something that I've
Yeah.
really worked on and I've done a lot more socially and out in the world. But it's scary. And as a kid, it was really scary because I couldn't control
Really
it. Like I couldn't
scary.
say like, okay, family, you go on a flight by yourselves and I'm going to stay home. Like that wasn't an option.
Yeah.
But flying as a kid, because I was scared of germs as a kid and heights. And so put me in a box with recirculated air and a high touch
Yeah.
surface and people throw up on planes. I was not mentally well when we traveled. I ended up in the hospital at times when we traveled because my anxiety got so bad. And like I said, at the time, they didn't know it was anxiety. They thought it was
Yeah.
everything else. But there are some mental health conditions that you're more likely to have intrusive thoughts. So one, which we mentioned, is OCD, very common. The two kind of link together. Intrusive thoughts can lead to OCD. Like I said, a lot of times they're hand in hand. PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. I struggled with this a lot after my mom passed. This is really dark. If you don't want to listen to it, skip ahead 30 seconds. I watched my mom pass and I had that image replay in my mind all the time. I would just be doing something with my kids and then that image would come into my head. and it would make me sick to my stomach. It was disgusting. It was awful. I've really worked on it. My therapist told me it was completely normal and natural. It's a sign of PTSD. And I couldn't stop it. I didn't know when it would pop into my head. It would just, boop, hello,
Hello.
day. So
Starts your heart better than a cup of coffee. Just that real fun movie.
And then you get hot and sweaty, and then you're just in a shitty mood. So this one I thought was interesting, which I didn't know. Eating disorders. People who have developed an eating disorder may experience intrusive thoughts that are harmful to their mental health. A lot of times they worry about the physical impact of food that will have on their body, in turn, which leads to great distress about eating. And it could cause additional behaviors such as purging in an effort to stop the thoughts. And I thought that one was interesting, but it makes sense because they're always worried about food. I just thought I was kind of surprised.
I completely relate to this as someone who's never been fully diagnosed with an eating disorder, but is self-diagnosed with intermittent eating disorders. I can completely attest. And I would say it's less intrusive thoughts and more ruminating thoughts, in my opinion, because it doesn't come out of nowhere. It's like every night when I put the kids to bed, it's almost like people with drinking things. Like every night when I put the kids to bed, I'm like, oh, it'd be so fun to just chill out and binge out so hard on food. Or this thing that I'm going to eat is going to change the way I feel, and it's going to change the way my clothes fit, and it's going to this and it's going to that. So I completely can see. I would have never correlated the two, but it is.
Yeah, I kind of pictured it for some people. It's like they see food and then they link it to this image that comes in their head of what they would look like if they ate it, and then that leads to purging. And so it's not a dark, scary well, it probably is to them. Like I know some people that have struggled with eating disorders. Eating is actually very scary to them. And that's like really interesting because that's not something I struggle with. But I think it makes perfect sense. But it's just it was a shock to me on that one.
You're totally right, and that's why they do trigger warnings on like Instagram posts and stuff, because I think it can be so jarring and triggering to people with eating disorders. And I know from experience with a close friend that had bulimia that food was terrifying, and they would get afraid when new food would come into the house, how they would handle it. It was like you were bringing like a sexual predator into the house and being like, he's going to stay on the couch for a while. Like they knew that a trigger food was in the fridge, and it was terrifying to them.
Right. And I know somebody who also struggled with it, and food was disgusting to them, especially like the higher calorie the food, the grosser it was. And so even if it was something that their body needed, especially once they hit that dangerous weight limit, it was disgusting. And so they had to force themselves to eat it. And then they felt like crap after because of the experience. It's almost like a very stressful situation. I'm sure there's others. I never
would have put those two together. Oh my God, we're going to have to do like a whole sub.
Yes. I'm going to throw anxiety in there as well, even though it wasn't on the list of when I researched, but I think anxiety.
Jenna's going to go ahead and diagnose it. Yeah.
Yep. When I really struggled with depression, I struggled with intrusive thoughts a lot.
For sure.
So here's the thing. Intrusive thoughts can be as minor as you think it's a scary situation, but the general public doesn't, or they can be so dark that you are scared to share them because they can be shocking and petrifying. So you have to remember when you go to therapy, if you have a great therapist that you trust, they have seen it. They have heard it. They heard it when they went through med school. They go through med school, right? Or when they went to get their license, they have heard it.
Yeah.
I think it's like 1 in 6 struggle with mental health, like severely, like lifelong mental health. Is that right? 1 in 6 people. And so they've definitely, if you think about all of these conditions that can have intrusive thoughts related to it, chances are they've heard it. If you're still scared to talk to your therapist about it, start slow. Just be like, I've had some thoughts. And if they ask what they are, just be like, they're really scary. I'm not comfortable sharing. And then you can kind of test the waters. Or maybe chances are if you have intrusive thoughts, it's not just one thought. It's a whole slew of them. Maybe test out and see how they react to your less dark, less scary ones. And then if they have a reaction, they're not a good fit. The good thing is there is treatment for intrusive thoughts. One, which we've talked about before, is CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And to me, CBT is one of the scariest things out there. I have
Requires
tried it.
changing of behaviors. It is hard and unpleasant.
Yes. And I have tried it and it was hard. A lot of it is exposure therapy,
Oh, it's so
depending on what
hard.
it is. Like I struggle with sickness. And so exposure therapy was hard. I've done some of it, I've made some progress. I needed to pause. I could not handle it at the time. So just know there's also, like, I still have done CBT for other things that weren't as difficult. It's there if you want it. It's hard.
It's
I'm not
hard.
gonna lie. And depending on what you're going through, it's hard. Like my intrusive thoughts and my OCD go hand in hand with my phobias. And so I have
Yeah.
a real fear, and my intrusive thoughts usually are centered around that. However, when I have an intrusive thought and it's not something that's related to my phobias, it's not as scary to work on. It's actually helpful to work on it. So know that it could be it could be an easy, helpful road, or it could be very difficult. Just kind of depends where you're at, because we're all at different things. The
And
whole
assume
goal.
that's another thing is like if you've never done, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. If
No,
you've
you're
never
good.
done therapy before, you don't know how it's going to feel. So kind of like my therapy on a Sunday where I have the opportunity to shut down for the rest of the day is ideal, because some days therapy doesn't affect me at all, like you said, and some days it knocks me sideways.
Mhm.
And so if you're new to therapy, plan it not to be like 10 minutes before you have to be to work, because it can fuck you up a little bit for
Oh, know that like you might
a
be.
minute.
Yeah. So my neighbor and I were talking about this. The hard therapy days, you're done for the day. If you had a 10 o'clock appointment,
Done.
you are mentally, physically done. You are beyond exhausted. It's the weirdest thing. It's
You're
we
gonna
were-
get a migraine if you're prone to migraines. You might get
Yes.
vertigo. You're gonna get, maybe Janelle gets a fever. Jen will always be like, "Did you have a bad therapy?"
Yeah.
Whenever I get like a 99
Are you
degree
stressed?
temperature, and I'll be like, "You're right."
Yep. It is the weirdest thing. And unless you experience it, you know what we're
It
talking
is.
about.
Oh
So
my god,
um,
it's so crazy because they like open your skull and like put it back down. Is how I think of it.
well, the best is when they open your skull and then they're like, "Oh, time's up for today. See you next week."
We're out of
But
time.
wait. I'm
But
not
wait, you
physically
didn't sew
well.
my skull back on. Help.
Yeah. With intrusive thoughts, the whole point of treatment is to not necessarily end them. And you have to remember, everyone has these wild, crazy thoughts. However, a lot of people, like I said, can be like, "That's dumb," or "That's weird. See you later." And that's the goal. The goal is to not stop these thoughts, because we're human. Our brains are weird. We don't know why they do half of what they do. So your goal is to reduce your sensitivity to the thought and its contents. And if you're ruminating, you can even just Google like how to end ruminating. And I still do a lot of those, especially like the stop. Like you physically just make yourself stop and you think about something else, or you do something else like with your body. And I think that's where some of my OCD has also like kicked in, because I try these things and then they work and then I just continue to do them to an extreme.
And don't you use tapping too, don't you?
Yes, but like a lot of these have become OCD behaviors.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's where I struggle.
Tapping's such a good one. Yeah.
It helps, and it helps like in those situations. And so I try to control these when I'm not going through a ruminating or a panic attack. But it's a hard balance over here.
It's a slippery slope, because you have to be careful that you don't teeter from ruminating thoughts into OCD tapping. So
Exactly.
like where do we fall here?
Yes. The other one is medication. There is medication if that's a route you want to go to. It's common for conditions like OCD and depression. And so you'll get like antidepressants and selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They're called SSRIs.
Whoop whoop.
They work for some, they don't work for all. So if your doctor puts you on an SSRI and it does not work, know that that's okay. I was on an SSRI before having kids, worked beautifully during pregnancy, and post kids didn't work anymore. And that's completely fine.
Same.
There's other stuff out there. And it's kind of interesting sometimes what some drugs are used for. And so just because your doctor puts you on an antidepressant does not mean you are depressed. I actually took an antidepressant to cure my migraine associated vertigo, which was not linked to any kind of mental issue at all. It was the weirdest thing. I was like, there is no way this is going to work. And it worked like a charm. So basically, migraine induced vertigo is I would, instead of getting a migraine, I would get dizzy and then have sensitivity to light, sound, and smell. But I always felt like somebody kept hitting me on the head with a baseball bat. And it's like that quick dizzy spell. And it was the
Yeah.
weirdest thing. And it took me a long time to find a doctor. I actually had to go to a balance specialist to figure out what exactly it was. And then he put me on that. And I was like, there's no way this is going to work. He put me on it. It worked. 3 months later, it came back and he said, that's common. But once it's gone for a year, you're considered cured. And it's been, I mean, it was after Ezra. So 7 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it was the weirdest thing. And so, yeah,
I'm so
just
jealous
because
because I'm doing everything for vertigo right now. And
Well,
it's like, please, something work. I'll cut my arm off if it'll work.
I will get vertigo still associated with
mine's
certain
not
things.
migraine associated at all. So that they've
Right.
ruled. I never have had a migraine as far as I know. So like I'm in a weird float on your own island problem. If it's migraine associated, they have a lot more research behind it because migraines are something that are like clinically able to be tested, where vertigo is just like, I take your word for it that you feel dizzy.
Right. Well, and so he had me do like the history was what he was able to figure it out for, because he was like, have you ever had migraines before? Or on the form it said, do you have migraines? And I clicked no. And so then he started talking to me and he was like, you've never had one. And I was like, well, actually, when I was like 19, maybe 20, I had like 3 and I had to go on medication because I actually got sick because they were so bad. And he was like, so you have migraines? And I was like, no. Like, I don't. And he was like, if you ever had one, you have them. And he said that women who got them in their early 20s, once they get close to 30, because I wasn't 30 yet, are very susceptible to getting this. And I was like, that is insane. Like, it was so weird. And he knew right away. And I was skeptical, but
I am dead over this. You're going to have to share what medication it is.
Ooh, it's been a while. I'm sure I could find it.
Think about it and put it in the show notes, because I have a girlfriend that has migraine vertigo and she is just like struggling.
Too bad she doesn't live here, because I have the best balance specialist and he's like, boom, know what it is.
Where do you find a balance specialist?
Like PCP referred me because she kept thinking it was like blood sugar or something related.
Yeah.
Because my worst dizzy spells or blood pressure, because every time I stood up, it was really bad. And then it would randomly happen. And a lot of times it happened when I was driving because of either sunlight or at night car lights.
Yes.
She was like, I don't know, like maybe you're having like these like spikes and drops. And then she was like, if this doesn't work, I'm just going to send you to a balance specialist. And so it didn't work. Whatever.
So everyone
tried.
Google balance specialist if you're doing this. So I've only ever seen a vestibular therapist, which is inner ear. That's what you can find those at like Pivot Chiropractic. But the vestibular therapist, and that's only for BPV, which is the kind of vertigo I get, which is like your crystals get wonky. It has nothing to do with migraines.
So the other the other treatment is self-care. A lot of people, if they're experiencing this, it could be a high stress time. So just recognizing what they are, that they're just thoughts, and label them when they happen, and just stopping them there. And eventually your body will start to be like less and less and less. A lot of times they're linked to stress. So if you can manage your stress, you can manage these intrusive thoughts. So say you're really stressed because you have a job interview and you're like, what if I completely bomb this interview? What if I go in and I forget all of my answers, or I stumble over all of my words, or I make a fool of myself? What if I just freeze and don't speak the whole time? You know, you have these like awful negative thoughts, and then managing that stress and talking yourself out of it can really help. And if you are somebody who has them because of stress, your main route is to lower your stress.
Yes, let's all solve our stress.
One day at a time.
Well, I'm saying you can't solve your stress, but a big thing that helped me, and one of my therapists told me once, was like, once you can figure out a way to like let it wash over you like waves in the ocean, then it will start to lose its power. When it's able to stop you in your tracks is when you're in the like lowest of the low. Once you can either find a way, your two options are kind of learn to let it wash over you and not react to it, or talk to someone about it.
Right.
I found that once you can verbalize it to someone, it loses its power by 50% immediately. But not everyone, especially, let's just say hypothetically, especially us mothers, may not want to tell certain people certain thoughts that we have about ourselves or our babies during certain times. So if you can find a safe person to say your thing to, it will lose 50% of its power that fucking day. but
Yep.
don't do it before you know that that person is safe, because then you
Yes.
just add a new ruminating thought of, when is CPS going to come take my kids, hypothetically.
It doesn't always mean that you have an underlying issue or behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It could just be a thought. It could be like a little season of your life. But if they're interfering with your day-to-day life, please go talk to somebody and get the
Please.
help you need.
And I don't know if you believe in this, but my witchcraft self tells me that you probably will. But like, familial trauma is something that I read a lot about. And there has been a lot of talk lately of a thing that you are, quote unquote, irrationally afraid of could be something that happened to a past family member that came down in your DNA. And so I'm always into that, like, reptilian brain, and like, where did we
Yeah.
come from and what did we evolve from? And there's been a lot of books recently, which I just ordered one the other night, is showing like family lineage. Someone's entire family worked in a coal mine and now they're afraid of small dark spaces.
Oh,
And so
interesting.
there's like this weird correlation if you're into like witchy shit, which I can like link a couple of books, but
That'd be cool.
obviously none of that is scientific, but I think it's kind of interesting. If you're like, where the fuck is this thought coming from? It might give you some power to say, maybe great grandpa Joe had something happen like this and this has nothing to do with me. I can let it go.
And it could also be, I'm going to throw this one out there, something that one of my therapists, one of the many, brought to my attention, because I struggle with germs, specifically the fear of vomit. Don't believe me, it's a thing. There is a whole
I believe you.
community out there. And being a mom, it's extra hard. Being a teacher, it was
Do you
hard.
guys have a name? Do you guys have like a cute little, like the vomit or the?
No,
So
because that
fun.
cute name would still be like trauma for me. Like
It would induce
so,
problems
yes,
for you guys.
that part of my CBT was just using the word and writing it and reading it, because I couldn't even
Ooh,
say
yes, I
the
can
word.
see how that would be.
It
Mhm.
was so
I
weird.
can see how
And
that
so
would be worthy.
I had this therapist that went over all of my family history, which I've never really had someone do. And when we came across the fact that my mom was sick when I was 2, she made me, my mom was still alive at the time, ask my mom if she ever got sick in front of me from chemo. And my mom was like, yeah. And so this is part of why I don't believe the whole kids are resilient hype.
Yeah.
I think to some extent.
Some
but
kids are resilient.
mom-
some of
yeah.
us aren't.
Well, I think it's to some extent. And so it's like my mom said,
Mhm.
because I asked her and I showed some anxious behaviors at that time, such as I would look for my mom in the middle of the night when she was in the hospital. I was found sleeping under chairs because I was trying to go to my mom's room. Well, you could say most kids would do that, because think about it. Like, our 2-year-olds do wake up in the middle of the night and come look for us. And if I couldn't find her, like, of course I'm
Yeah.
still looking around the house. And so she thinks that my fear of vomiting, not me vomiting, but other people vomiting, is related to that, even though I can't remember that experience. I have no
Yeah,
recollection
no,
of it.
it imprints on you for sure.
And so my mom said I've always shown OCD behaviors. Everything, not my room, but everything in my other part of my world had to be very in order and neat and tidy. And I always struggled with germs, restaurants, everything since I was a little kid. And so it's all kind of made sense once you lined it up, even though I don't remember that experience. And my mom was like, you were fine. You were just in the back seat and you weren't crying. You were fine. And so
Because
it's
you
like,
were in full shock and trauma absorption
and so I was
mode.
probably trying to process this. And it wasn't
yeah.
just the fact of vomiting. My world was upended and I knew my mom was sick and I knew something was going on. And so as a young child, I associated that with cancer, with dying, with mom leaving, with mom sick, with mom disappearing for who knows how long, and being a different person, because this was
Yeah.
back in maybe 1990, maybe still 80s. So now they put you on all these drugs to make you feel better. They didn't do that back then. It was kind of like you were so sick.
Godspeed.
Yes, and they
Yeah.
didn't know as much about it then. And so in my little brain, I'm like, this isn't my mom. This isn't my normal routine, because people were taking me to school, picking me up from school, taking me to their house, having me sleep at their house, because my mom, especially on her chemo days, she had to go every single Friday and she was so sick afterwards.
Yeah.
And so as a 2-year-old, I'm going from house to house. I don't know what's going on. I'm already prone to anxiety. So then I'm just like real fucked. I have just associated this, and I still in my 30s am not able to completely get over this phobia. One day, maybe.
Yeah. You're going to do it one day.
It's better.
Otherwise,
I've gotten better.
If that's your worst thing, like Josh still can't do vomit and he doesn't have any of this trauma. Like if this is your worst, like you're great at blood and I'm not great at blood. So it's fine.
Well, and it's funny because people will be like, well, no one likes vomit. It's gross. I'm like, to me, it's not gross. To me, it's petrifying, which does not make sense to the normal person. But
vomit
if you are
does not bother me at all.
Oh, I know. That's why I'm always like,
zero.
My kid has a stomach ache. Can they come to your house?
Yeah, Jenna and I trade off. I'm like, my kid's bleeding. One of my kids sustained a very bloody head injury once, and I was like, and Jenna was like, all right, pressure, this, and I was like,
and I'm like looking at the wound.
Watch. It's dripping on the floor. It's in my, I just remember it was in my watch and being like, there's blood in my watch. There's blood. And Jenna was like, all right, here's what we do. And if it's vomit, I'm like, I'll catch it in this hand and I'll wipe it up with this hand.
And I remember it was like one of the first times we hung out and you're like, I know you don't do germs. And I was like, to me, this isn't germs. I got this.
Blood's not germ. Then I was like, okay, good.
Like, I'm good. I'm good for that. But if you are someone who struggles with the fear of vomit, reach out to me, even though it might be scary to the average person. That doesn't make sense, because there's a whole community of us and you could be in our club. It's the Cool People Club. But there's a lot of tips and it's helped. I've gotten better, but I'm not perfect. And my therapist was like,
sometimes when you have little kids,
right? Well, my therapist was like, you have your own exposure therapy by having kids, especially because my oldest is a vomiter. And she was like, you have your own like exposure therapy. She's like, he's already doing the work for me. So yeah.
They are just vomit.
But that's a lot of times what my intrusive thoughts kind of go around, because to me, that's a phobia. And then I have other ones. This also is a quick little tip. When I became an adult and my intrusive thoughts got bad again, I started Googling it and reading other people's intrusive thoughts and how fucked up they were. Actually helps me. Because there's
that's brilliant. Why haven't I thought of that? Now we have Reddit where everybody's fucked up thoughts is just on the internet. We can totally look it up. Why haven't I ever thought? Oh, I love
just
that.
Just even Google like examples of intrusive thoughts or intrusive thought list. There are some fucked up ones that I was like, oh, I'm good.
I'm fine. This is vomit, no big deal.
Fear of crashing a plane, I'm good compared to some of these. Because
nothing.
So happy mental health awareness month.
I think this is a really good one for mental health awareness, because I don't think people necessarily always give this.
Well, I don't think most people admit to them because they're.
I don't think most people, well, that's what we're here for. We're here to talk about things we don't talk about, but I also don't think people give it like the credit that it deserves in the mental health stigma community. Right. People are just like, oh, that thought again, blah, like forget about it. Or after you have a baby, it is a whole new game changer of intrusive and ruminating thoughts about that baby. And my husband has a whole new litany of worries about our kids. He worries about them constantly, more than I do. He'll just like call me and be like, I'm just worrying about the kids. Is everyone okay? And like, they're, as far as I know, I haven't seen them in a couple hours, but as far as I know, they're fine. But he doesn't even like them like being outside by themselves or like.
Yeah, my husband only gets intrusive thoughts around stressful situations. And so that's considered like a normal situation. Like he had an interview today and it was kind of like more of like the what ifs type thing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm kind of paranoid. And then like that something's going to happen. I'm going to freeze or forget my answers. And then he starts over preparing. And so I kind of have to talk him down. But then after the interview, like, boop, it's gone. So that's considered normal.
I also think intrusive thoughts and ruminating thoughts are something that aren't really factored in with ADHD as much as they should be, because going on medication for ADHD has cut my intrusive and intrusive still kind of the same. I hadn't had too much trouble with it. I had a lot of trouble with intrusive the like 6 to 12 months after my dad died. But ruminating thoughts before my ADHD medicine was a daily problem. Like I needed to go to Minnesota this weekend to be with my family. And before being on ADHD medicine, I would have found reasons why I couldn't go and thought of that as a reason to stay home. And I've done it 10 times since I've lived here, where I'm supposed to go home, or I couldn't go to class in college. I'd walk to the door, I'd have my backpack on, I'd be walking to school, and I'd have to turn around and go back because some thought was like, you shouldn't go today. You shouldn't go today. So I have very little issues now that I'm medicated for my ADHD. Not to say I'm cured. I will never be
Right.
cured. I will need all there's 10 more times I will need all new medication. I will always be diligent on that. But I think that we're going to see some really interesting research as us 30 somethings start getting diagnosed with ADHD because taking the medication has cut it down dramatically for me.
That's great. I didn't know that. And I wouldn't have
No, I
associated
mean,
that, but it makes sense.
yeah, same
So,
with the eating disorder. I wouldn't have associated it. It
no.
makes complete sense when you think about it.
So the takeaway is intrusive thoughts, they stick in your mind. They can cause you distress, anxiety. They're upsetting because they do feel very upsetting and foreign. And there's help. Reach out to us, to your therapist, to whoever. If you are scared, just test the water a little, dip a toe in. And so with that, call your therapist.
And take your meds.